So again, hello everyone from South Carolina Realtors, and welcome to today's webinar, zipForm Plus, Power Up Your Business from Start to Finish. Again, my name is Laura Prasad, and it is my pleasure to be your host this afternoon. Just a brief breakdown of some of the webinar objectives we will be covering today. We're going to take a look at the zipForm Plus platform, just a quick review and overview, and then we'll be taking a deeper look, into your profile settings, where you're able to configure some of the settings that you may need inside of zipForm Plus. We'll then be creating a basic template and understanding template auto-apply features. So that can save you some time with respect to making sure that all the data in your templates is added to your transactions. I'll review a few of these concepts for anyone who was not able to attend the last sessions, but we did go over in the last, or I believe it was February or March's training, how to create an e-signature packet and how to create a template. So we'll be creating a new transaction, and then I'll show you a little bit about document storage with some of our zipTMS functionality. All right, so we're going to begin today by signing into zipForm Plus. So bear with me while I switch screens here. All right. All right, so you can sign into zipForm Plus by going to www.zipformplus.com. And once we've landed on that home sign-in page, you can just easily put in your username and then enter your password. For anyone who already has a zipForm Plus account, hopefully you know how to do this. And for those who have not yet provisioned their zipForm Plus account, you can do that on our website at www.ziplogics.com and clicking on your NAR transaction management benefit. You'll then be sent an email, well, you'll be prompted to set up your account, and then you'll be sent an email with that username and password that I just used to sign in. All right, so we're now signed into a zipForm Plus individual agent account, and this is the account that everyone gets as a part of NAR or as a realtor. We'll take a brief look first at our navigation bar and just refamiliarize ourselves with that. I think a question came in. Let me check real quick. Okay, a few people want those previous sessions. Yes, I am happy to send those over. So inside of zipForm Plus, we have what is called our navigation bar. And you can think of this really as a global overview of everything that you have access to inside of zipForm Plus. Once you sign in, you'll be immediately landed on your transactions home landing page. And for all intents and purposes, when we use the word transactions inside of zipForm Plus, what we're really referring to is just a folder for a deal. Each of these files represents a unique client and property combination. So it would be whether you're working with a buyer or a seller or whatever the case may be, you would create one of these unique files for each of those deals. And that helps you to consolidate all of that information into one file. So it's really just doing that electronically. Like if you were actually doing it in person or offline, you would put everything probably in a file folder. So this functions very similarly to what that would be. It's the best analogy I can kind of come up with for that. To the left of transactions is your dashboard. The agent dashboard consolidates all of the most important information for transactions just into one convenient hub where you can go and find all of your information pertaining to what exactly currently is going on with your deals that you're working on. We can revisit the dashboard a little bit later if we have time, but just know that all of these widgets and this information here are not editable on the dashboard. That's because this is part of zipTMS or Transaction Management System functionality. All of the information that you input into your transactions is going to automatically flow over to your dashboard. So this is really tracking information inside of your transactions without you doing any unnecessary work that you wouldn't already be doing. Like if you fill out your contracts, this is going to populate automatically. We'll take a look at that a little bit later. Templates, a brief review from last time. Templates are time-saving packets of information. They can contain contracts for the buy side, contracts for the sell side, and even checklists for action items. Let's open up a template quickly. I've created this template for the buy side. So anytime I work with a buyer on a deal, they want to put an offer on a house, I have all my contracts packaged here that I would use if I were working with a buyer. So that's how templates work. Additionally, if I go over to, this might be a bad example, let me grab a different template. If I go over to, say, checklists, we have a more robust template here where I've added some action items. I can go over this a little bit later if we have time, but really all this is action items that pertain to my current deal. So do I need my buyer at some point to obtain a cashier's check for closing? If I do, I can add this as a task, and every time I apply this template to a buy-side transaction, that task will automatically pop in. So this is kind of a cool feature that can save you some time. To the right of templates is tasks, and tasks is, again, a global overview of all of those checklist items we just saw. So it's filtering information in from every active transaction we currently have. And you can identify what a task belongs to based on the transaction name that corresponds with it. This is called list view, and it's showing, obviously, as the name says, showing everything in a list mode. However, you can go to the upper left-hand corner and click calendar, and you can change that up and see things in a different view if you want to. We're not going to be focusing too much on tasks today, but really as a review, if you want to learn more about tasks, I would recommend watching the second webinar in our series where we go over more of zipTMS functionality. Contacts on our nav bar just lets us consolidate all of the individuals or service providers whom we contact on a regular basis. So this would function very similarly to any address book in your email or contacts you might have in your phone. To the right of contacts is partners. This showcases all of our partner integrations. That's companies that ZipLogix has partnered with in order to give you a really more robust selection of options to work with from listing to closing. So with our partners, you can order a title, you can create videos, you can do a number of things with all these different partners. So feel free to peruse those at your convenience. Some of them are free to our users and some of them are an additional cost. So if you want to learn more about any of them, you can just click on the Learn More icon. And then finally, all the way on the right-hand side, we have our Help tab. Help corresponds with the support material on our website. So if you have any questions about a specific product or feature, you can simply click on Support Material, and that's going to link you right into our website, www.ziplogix.com. And it links you right into the knowledge base here so that you can access support articles that might be helpful to you. Also under help, we have the option to sign up for additional live training if you're interested. This may probably not be necessary just because we are going to be going throughout the year of 2019 with webinars targeted specifically for South Carolina realtors. So you will probably receive all of the training that you need this year, but if you would like training on ancillary products that you've purchased, you can feel free to sign up for those there. And then finally, we have our in-app guided help. You may also notice the presence of this in the lower right-hand corner. Either way can activate it. With guided help, you can do walkthroughs of certain areas of the zipForm Plus platform. Obviously, help does not have a walkthrough, but if you go, for example, to transactions and you click on guided help, you can use the walkthroughs to create a new transaction or create a new template. So these are just helpful tips until you get a little bit more familiar with zipForm Plus. They're there to assist you if you want to use them, and if not, you don't have to. All right, so we're going to go ahead and review our profile settings before we dive a little bit more deeply into templates and transactions and document storage. You can access your profile settings in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Let me make that a little bit bigger. If you click on Me, you'll be presented with a drop-down, and from here, if you select Profile and Settings, you'll be prompted to change any notifications that you want to within zipForm Plus within your profile settings. And just as an aside, if you want to add a picture of yourself, you can do that here. It says change because I already had a picture in previously. Otherwise, if it's your first time, it should just say add photo. And if you click on that, you'll be able to access the hard drive of your computer, and you can just pull in whatever picture you want to use, like so. All right, we're going to go and click Profile Settings. And this launches us into our individual agent account profile settings. Our About Me shows all of our information as it pertains to this specific account. Your first name, last name, email, phone. The beauty of this area is that you can go and edit anything you want. So if your email changes or if you change your phone number, you can go in here and make those changes. Always make sure that if you make those changes, you go up to the top and just click Save. I'll do this for example. You see that save highlights here, and if you click that, that's going to save up that information. And I'm just going to change that back. Now, if we scroll further down, you'll see this window for an email signature. The biggest differentiation I want to make is that this email signature will not affect your email signature outside of zipForm Plus. So if you use Gmail, Yahoo, whatever the case may be, and you already have an email signature set up, that is perfectly fine. This email signature here is going to be for all outbound notifications from zipForm Plus, provided that you click Include in all outbound notifications. An example of an outbound notification from zipForm Plus would be if you send a form out, like if you just email it from inside of zipForm, this email signature will automatically be attached to that email. And you have all of your standard form editing tools here. You can adjust the font size or the formatting of your signature, but you can set up that signature right here. And then to the right of About Me is Sign In and Security. From here, you can access your reset password link. So if you would like to reset your password, if you think for some reason that your account has been compromised, or else it's just too hard for you to remember, or it's time to change it, you can reset your password right here. It will give you a link at your email address that you have established and or that is associated with your account, and from there you can change your password. This will also be the case if you have just signed up for a zipForm Plus account. You're then able to reset your password. Usually they give you the password of welcome1, so you can change that to whatever is easy for you to remember. Security and account recovery information. Here you can set up two-factor authentication. This is primarily used inside of brokerage agent accounts, so we don't have, frankly, a ton of individual agents who use this. But if you would like to encrypt the front end of your account, you can do that with two-factor authentication. All this is going to do is every time you go to sign into zipForm Plus, it will give you a one-time use code at your cell phone, and you can enter in that code in order to sign in. So that's why they call it two-factor authentication. It not only requires you to know your password for your account, but also to enter in that code that you would receive at your phone number. So you can add your mobile phone number or email if you're interested for two-factor authentication. To the right of sign-in and security is offices. Your company information can go here. You can adjust this very much like About Me at any time you want. When you adjust this, it will only be applied to future transactions you create. So unfortunately, if you change companies, it's not going to retroactively go and change that in transactions that are already established. So just be sure to bear that in mind if you're doing those changes. If you have to change something on a transaction that's already created in terms of your company information, you will want to go back and make those changes manually. And I make that distinction because a lot of times people don't realize that, which is obviously why we've put this disclaimer here. To the right of offices is forms. This shows you all of the forms libraries you have access to. This is the primary one. You can ignore the other ones, but the South Carolina Realtors is the primary one you will have access to. You may also, depending on your local association, have access to local forms or forms from your MLS. So you may have anywhere from 1 to 3 libraries here, maybe even 4. And that just shows you when your expiration date is, so you know when you have to go and renew your account, and you will get a notification if you need to renew as well. This shows you all of the products you have access to. South Carolina Realtors member benefit includes all of the zipForm Plus base service that we're looking at now. It also includes ZipLogix Digital Ink and zipForm Mobile as a benefit. So you will probably see those apparent as well underneath products. To the right of products is settings. Speaking of ZipLogix Digital Ink, here you can set up your e-signature options. If you're curious how to do e-signing, be sure to watch that third webinar where we go over e-signing with ZipLogix Digital Ink. So if you're using e-sign, you want to make sure that you've checked this radio button right here and that is established. You'll also want to establish your time zone here. That way all of the signature dates and timestamps accurately reflect exactly what time your client signed. Below we have a Docusign integration. Docusign is not our product at ZipLogix, but we have partnered with them in order to allow you to send documents through e-signing using the Docusign system. This of course requires that you have an outside Docusign account. So if Docusign is your preferred signing solution, you can use it. However, because all of you have access to ZipLogix Digital Ink as part of your member dues, hopefully you'll utilize that feature. Below we have our account preferences. There's a lot to unpack here, so I'm not going to go too much into detail, but you do have your transaction list page, which is what we landed on when we signed into zipForm Plus. If you want to, you can switch to make your agent dashboard your landing page. And so that's just a matter of preference. A lot of people prefer that transaction list, some prefer template, or some prefer dashboard, pardon. So that's up to you what you want to set for that. Let's see what else. Our template preferences, overwrite transaction data with template data when applied. So if this is checked, if you don't want transaction data to be overwritten, if you've already made changes in your transaction and then you add a template, you'll want to make sure to come and uncheck this. If you want template data to override, you'll want to make sure that this is checked. And I think that's just about all we need to look at on that page. And then finally, we have our notification settings. Notification settings, I'll tell you a secret about these. They are all defaulted on. Most people don't realize that. So if you come to notification settings, to turn a notification off. Let's say, for example, I'm seeing that someone's having audio difficulties. Give me one moment, please. Is everyone still able to hear me? Can everyone just pop something quick in the question box so I can make sure that everyone is with me before we proceed? Awesome, thank you. All right, and to the person who typed that in, I would recommend just trying to change up your audio mode. You can dial in with the telephone. It will give you an access code, or you can use the sound on your computer or device. Anyway, as I was saying, all of these notifications are automatically defaulted on, meaning that if you come here, it will be to turn a notification off. A lot of times people will say, I just want to sign into zipForm Plus to get my notifications. I really don't want to get an email every time something changes. If that's the case, you can come here and set all of those email notifications to off. In-app notifications are going to be notifications that show up over here under this bell icon, if you can see where I'm indicating up top. So this is going to be where all of your in-application or in-app notifications appear. So maybe you don't want to receive an email every time. You can turn that off here under notification settings. All right. So we're going to travel back to the transactions page. So that's a very high level overview of what you have access to inside of your profile settings. So if you saw today something that you might want to go change, you can go right into your zipForm Plus account and go to Me, Profile and Settings, and make those adjustments for yourself. We're going to go ahead and just quickly review template creation. I believe it was 2 sessions ago, I did create a template. As I mentioned, templates are time-saving packets of information that can contain various things such as documents that you would use for whatever side of the deal you're working on, also checklists. We'll go ahead and create a new template now. I'm going to click New, and from here I'm going to establish what I want to use this template for. I would always recommend creating 2 separate templates to save time. You want a new listing template and a new purchase or offer template. Obviously, if you work with leases or lease listings, you can also create templates for those. But the reason, of course, that I would recommend that is because with a new listing, you're using documents for a seller versus a new purchase or offer, you will be using documents for a buyer. Let's do a new purchase or offer template. So I'm just going to call this purchase residential buyer template for 2019. And then I'm going to establish the property type. We'll say that the primary properties I work with are residential, so I'll check that. And that's what this template is going to be designated for. To the right, we have our scope options. Your scope is automatically going to default to personal in an individual agent account. So you'll see these global or office options, but they are not enabled inside an individual account. So because your scope defaults to personal, all that means is that you are the only one who has access to this template you're creating. Below you have auto apply options. One thing about templates, because they are meant to be time-saving packets of information, our goal is to make everything as efficient and eliminate as many clicks inside of zipForm Plus as possible. For auto apply options, you can choose do not automatically apply this template to new transactions. With this, you would decide just on a case-by-case basis every time you create one of those folders for your deal, do I want to apply this template or does it not make sense to do so? For example, if I were to create a new listing, obviously this would not make a lot of sense to apply this template. So you can decide on a case-by-case basis whether you want to do that. Another option is to automatically apply this template to purchase residential new transactions. I would say that this is probably the most intuitive and time-saving feature, because if you automatically apply the template to purchase residential new transactions, once you create your transaction, as long as it meets two conditions, number one, that it's a purchase or offer, and number two, that it's a residential property, the system is going to go, okay, there's a template available for this that's meant to be auto-applied, and it's going to apply all of that content automatically. So I'm going to leave this for automatically apply the template to purchase residential new transactions. A third option, which we're not going to get into too much today, is automatically apply this template to all new transactions. And this would be something that you would use if you only ever work with buyers or only ever work with sellers, or if you've created a very generic template with a checklist. Okay, so we clicked new, we named our template, we established our property type, and we chose our auto apply option. We're going to go down to the bottom and click save. And one disclaimer I want to make about templates is if you have not already set these up, please go and do that right now. It takes about, probably not right now, but after the session concludes. It does take probably about 10 to 20 minutes of your time, but it is going to save you so much time in the long run that it really is worth going in and creating these. Plus, it's part of your member benefit. To access documents that you would add maybe to the buy side of the deal, you can go over to the right-hand side to the All Forms library. And I'm just going to switch over to South Carolina. This is one of the forms libraries you'll have access to. So these are all fillable forms that you have access to inside of your South Carolina Realtors library. And that again will be apparent right when you click on all forms. So maybe for a buyer, I would want to add, let's say, a closing checklist. What else? Agreement to buy and sell for residential properties. We'll do a cover sheet, exclusive right to buy. And one cool thing that you can actually do here, if you go up to the top, is you can search for a name or description for a form. So if I put in buyer, for example, if I don't know quite what all of these forms are yet, I can quickly kind of hone in on exactly what I would want to add in. Now, just because you add a form into a template doesn't necessarily mean that you have to or will be using it in a transaction. All it means is that it will be available to you so that you can use it if you want to. Let's open up one of these forms. I'm going to open up this cover sheet, and I'm going to start filling out a little bit of information that would be pertinent every single time I work with a buyer. So we want to keep things really generic. We don't want to put in buyer names because obviously this is going to be variant from transaction to transaction. And our goal here with templates is to save as much time as possible by entering in the same information that we would have to key in every single time. So we have our property information. Again, probably not something we'll want to fill out simply because this is not a transaction. However, something that we can fill out is our selling broker information. That's because obviously this is us, so it's not going to be changing too much. And excuse me, filling out Detroit in a South Carolina form. I don't know if I mentioned we are located in Fraser, Michigan. That's just about 15 minutes north of Detroit for anyone who is familiar with the Southeast Michigan area. Oops. And then the phone number and then the email address. So theoretically, I'm never going to have to go in this form and fill out this information again. It will be done for me every single time I work with a buyer. Another example might be a closing company. Let's say that I work with the same company every time. Street address, oops, it's doing a phone number there. And we'll do a telephone number. And we'll go up to the top and we're going to click Save. Always make sure to click Save if you make any changes in your forms. So those entries were all made in the cover sheet. If we go back to our template documents area and we open up a different document, let's say this agreement to buy and sell, you'll see that some of the information is already going to populate this form automatically. So anytime a form asks for the same text entry, there we go. So anytime the form asks for the same text entry, is something that you've entered in a different form, it's automatically going to populate that form. That way I don't have to go into all of my different documents and fill out the same piece of information. This is part of the transaction management system functionality, is that it brings all of the same information into every field that requires it. If you're working inside of a form, you'll also see all of your standard form editing tools at the top of the screen. You can use, for example, a spell check with spelling. You can highlight, you can strike out on your forms, and you can also even add a photo to a form. That's kind of a cool feature by clicking on, actually that's over here on the right, I apologize, under photos. If I click on photo and attach photo, I can pull a photo right into this form, and once I send it out, that photo will be apparent in the email. If I click on send, I can email this form right out via email. This is a good example of an instance where that email signature we were looking at in our profile settings would be attached. Let's click back. And we can open another document and you can see that information has auto-populated this as well. If you want to get a little bit more in depth in templates and try to save some more time, you can go over to the checklist icon and you can create checklists that would be pertinent to, in this template's case, the buyer side of the deal. If I had created a listing template, obviously I would want to do seller items here. Let's create a new checklist. We can do this by clicking on the new checklist icon, and I might call this one buyer responsibilities. If I click Save, that establishes a new checklist, and then I can click Create a new task and do something like obtain title. I can set a relative due date of, say, maybe 5 days before. That's just an example, and I click Save, and it establishes a relative due date. Now, what happens with a relative due date is once I apply this template to a transaction, it's automatically going to convert this based on the dates I establish. So if I established a possession date as, say, June 30th, this obtained title will automatically convert to, that should have been closing date, I think, I apologize. It should have it should automatically convert to June 25th. All right, so now that we've created a very, very simple template, let's go over to transactions, and I'm going to create a brand new transaction. You're going to see a couple things here. If I click new, let's say I'm working with a buyer. I want to create a file for this deal. I click on new and I select new purchase or offer. Now it will allow me to name my transaction, which you can either do by the street address or you can use the buyer or seller name if you're more comfortable with that. And then below you can click on property type. Now I mentioned earlier when I auto applied that template that a transaction has to meet two conditions now in order for that template to be auto applied. For the template that we created, the two conditions were that the transaction is a purchase or offer, and also that it is a residential property type. So I want you to watch down here at the bottom once I click residential. You can see it automatically applied that template to this transaction. And I have a couple other templates I've created with the same conditions. So all of those have been auto applied to the transaction. Now, if I click on a different property type, say multi-unit, you'll notice that the template disappears. That's because it's only met one of the two criteria necessary for the template to be auto-applied. I hope that kind of makes sense. At the bottom, the select template, this is what would happen if you did not auto-apply a template. You can select one from the drop-down here based on what you've already created. We'll go back to residential here, go down to the bottom and click Save. I've just created now one of these files for my brand new transaction. It's going to open me right up to the transaction, onto the transaction summary. And in here, I can make some changes. Let's say, and anytime you make those changes, always make sure to click Save. I can add in my buyer if I know who that is. I'm clicking on buyer right here. I'm going to do his first and last name and his email address. I can also click Save as Contact, and it will save Joe up to the top in my Universal Global Contacts area so that if I ever need his information again, I can go up to Contacts and access it. We're going to click Save at the bottom. And so now we have a couple things going on. Number one, we've entered the information for this transaction. And number two, we've added our buyer information in. You can see that the title officer information automatically populated based on entries I made in the forms. And if I scroll down further, I'll come across the purchase summary. The purchase summary is going to appear on top because we created a new purchase or offer. Now, if I scroll down further, had we created a new listing transaction, the listing summary would then appear on top, with the purchase summary then demoted to the bottom. That's because it wants to show you the most pertinent summary to you first. If I click on this pen icon, I can enable editing. So I'll click, we'll do the 6th for my offer date. We'll say that the offer expiration is going to be June 13th. We'll say that the offer acceptance, to time travel a little bit, was the 7th, and then the date of contract, we'll say, we'll change that one. We'll say that that date of contract was also the 7th, and then the closing date I'm going to establish as June 25th. Let's click Save. So that is our transaction summary. Now, if we move over one tab to parties, you'll notice that we already have a number of parties added in. This information is coming from those template sources, at least for the selling agent and broker and for the closing company. Now, for Joe here, we just entered his information in the summary. And this is yet again another example of that zipTMS functionality. Because we entered Joe's information in one location, it's automatically populated over here where it requests that same information. You'll also see this illustrated when we move over one tab further to Documents, and we click on our cover sheet. Let's go and find that. So this 2-page cover sheet that we were using before, You can see that a lot of information has populated this. We have Joe's name in here now and his email. We have our property information. Had I initially come to this form and filled out this information, it would also travel backward to the transaction summary. So the information workflow goes both ways. And this information was pulled in from my template. So now I have almost half of this form filled out just because I created that template ahead of time. And the next time I go to do a buyer deal, I can do the same thing. If I make any changes in the form, for example, if I had a buyer 2 and I added her, or Joe's, who I added on the transaction summary, this is not going to alter the original template. It's simply adding on to what we already have here. We go back, you see that if I go to parties, Jen will now be here as well, right here. So it doesn't matter where you enter the information. The point is just that you add it. And if you do, it will be apparent in all fields that request it. Talking a little bit about document storage. Sometimes all of these contracts can get a little bit overwhelming. And so that is why we have the add folder icon to compartmentalize some of this information. Let's click add folder, and let's, for example, do documents to send for signing. And then we're going to click OK. Once we do that, if we scroll down, we can see that folder in the lower right-hand corner. And now we can go and click, and I'm just holding my mouse down and drag and drop everything that we want to be signed either now or in the future. And you can see this helps a little bit to break up the monotony of all of these documents, which can get a little bit overwhelming. And again, just because you have a document inside of a transaction does not necessarily mean you need to use it. If you don't end up using it, that is absolutely fine. It will just be here for your convenience should you need to do so. So you can see this is breaking up kind of a lot of the repetition that we see with some of these forms. Now it's a lot cleaner and easier to look at things and identify these. If I want to open the documents to send for signing, I just click and I can see all of my forms that I added are now in there. I use the drag and drop system to pull these forms into the folder, but you can actually create a folder and then add your documents directly in by clicking on the Add Doc area. Right, so that is how you would do folders. So it's just a nice little feature to, again, kind of break up the monotony of all of these different contracts being right here under documents. That can get a little bit overwhelming at times. Okay, I'm going to pause for a moment because I have a couple questions that have come in. Jay, you've asked, so if my assistant and I both want to access the documents, can we set it to global or office, or is that not an option? Jay, that would depend on what type of account you have. You can find that out by just going up to me and clicking, and you can see this one says this is an individual agent rather. If you're an individual agent, you will not be able to share at a global or office level. That would be part of a multi-user account. The broker administrator administers all of the information in the account, and the agents remain compliant to that. So short answer, individual agent, no, but if you have a brokerage account, then those options will be available. And Deborah says, I was born and raised in Michigan, Wayne County. Awesome. I am actually from Oakland County, so that is just right next door. Once documents are signed, can you delete the original forms you sent to them earlier, CC asks? Yes, you absolutely can delete them. You may want to keep them and retain them just in case you need to send them again for signature. If something happens, maybe and there's a counter offer, there's never any harm in keeping them, but if you want to delete the originals because you already have a signed one, you can surely do that just by clicking on the drop down and then just removing the form. All right, I think that is all of the questions for the moment. So I'm going to move along from documents over to checklists. And you can see that my checklist has automatically populated this transaction. So these are checklists from those 3 templates that were auto-applied. They've automatically come in here, and we can see also that because we established that closing date as June 25th, this relative due date has now converted to June 20th, as I was mentioning. So it does give it a fixed due date based on that relative date you set in the template. This is contingent, of course, upon you setting that closing date or whatever date you've chosen for it to be relative to. Now, if the closing gets pushed back, you can always just click on due date, and you can change this due date right in here. Like if it's June 20th now, I'll say, okay, I want to choose a fixed due date, and I want to change that to June 23rd. And again, you can do this without altering the original template. And then all of your key transaction due dates are also going to appear here once you've established them, either in the transaction summary as we did, or in areas that request them inside of your forms. All right. Trying to think, oh, I did promise I'd circle back to the dashboard, so I'm going to do that really quickly before we wrap up today. Your agent dashboard is located on the extreme left-hand side of your navigation bar. From your dashboard, you can access information pertinent to sales prices, such as a listing or a purchase price. You can also access your commission percentage, which you can set up. I don't know how many of you saw that commission area right under the purchase summary, but you can enter values in there and have your commission populate relative to your quarterly sales. You can also track how many transactions you have closed. If you want to click on this Run Full Report icon, looks a little bit like one of those stock market arrows. That's going to give you an all-encompassing overview of all of the transactions that have been closed. This is year to date, by the way, so it will show you all the way back to the beginning of January. If you want to export this as a CSV, you can. This is a great resource for just to see how much you're producing in terms of closing deals, or even for tax purposes, these reports can be really great. We have our selling gross here, our commission listing gross, purchase total, listing total, and so on. Now, if you want to run another report from this screen, all you have to do is click on the drop-down for closed transactions. Let's change this to new listings. And this gives us kind of a year out. We'll change this to, say, March. And we'll click Run Report, and it shows us all of the new listings we've had in that time period. And all of these transaction names are actually clickable. So if I go and click on 143 Roast Meat Hill Road, it is going to take me right to the transaction itself. All the way on the left, we have our signature packets in progress. Again, hearkening back to our ZipLogix Digital Ink training, that is the 3rd training in this series. And for anyone who has requested those trainings, I'll be happy to send them. I know that they are also available on the company YouTube channel as well, South Carolina Realtors YouTube channel, so you may be able to access those there. Listings that expire this month, this is going to be contingent upon a listing expiration date. If you've created a new listing, make sure to add in those key numbers and dates like the expiration date, because that's what's going to populate this widget. I'll just give you a quick example of that. If I go back to my transactions and I find a listing, and you can kind of tell by looking at the preview here. So here is a listing. We're going to turn this back to an active listing, and we're going to make sure that that listing expiration date is sometime in June. So we'll change that here and make that June 26th and click Save. And now when we go back to the dashboard, you'll see that the listings that expire this month has now changed to 1. Now, obviously, you wouldn't change a transaction status back from closed to active, but that was just an example to show you how this would populate. So if I click on that, I now see this transaction name, and I can run that report again. Transactions that close this month is simply based on closing date instead of listing expiration date. So this is going to be for all of the purchases or offers that you're working on. Same applies. You can click and you can see what that transaction is. And as we can see, that is the one that we were just working on. Retention's ending in 30 days. So what happens is zipForm Plus stores all of your information for your state retention period. Most state retention periods are between 3 and 7 years. I know Michigan is 5, and my apologies, I don't know what the off the top of my head what South Carolina's is, but we do store your transactions for that period. Once that period is complete, it will let you know that there are transactions that are set to be leaving the system. So we're not going to blindside you and remove your information. We store it for that retention period, and then you have the option, if retention is showing here, for you to click and for you to export that information. So at least you can keep it for your records or store it on your computer. A recent activity gives you an audit trail of everything that has occurred inside of your zipForm Plus account. So this is like for every transaction and the templates you create, forms you add. You can click see more. We can go back 3 weeks, 4 weeks, all the way back to April. So that's your recent activity log. Additionally, a lot of these hyperlinks are clickable. So if I click on one of these, it's going to jump me right into that transaction itself. So that eliminates 1, 2, 3 clicks to go and find and locate and open that transaction. A potential sales volume is based on listing price and purchase price. So that will be reflected here based on those numbers that you enter in. And then you can also see what properties you're actively marketing and what your active transaction types are. And again, don't forget about guided help. If you're just getting familiar with a specific feature, guided help may be a great tool to help you the first couple times just until you're comfortable with that. All right, and I'm just going to pop right back into our PowerPoint, so bear with me for just a moment. All right, so I did want to open it up if anyone has any more questions that I can answer. I see a couple just came in, so let's see what we've got. Holly, you said grew up in Bloomfield Hills. Awesome. That is actually, I grew up in Rochester, so only about 20 minutes from where I'm from. Fellow Michigander there. Holly, you've asked, with the contacts, it seems I end up with multiple contacts with each person. Why is that? That's a great question. That could be because if you're entering contacts inside of the transaction parties and you always select Save as Contact, sometimes multiple entries will occur in your Global Contacts tab. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, but if that's the case, just make sure that you only save someone as a contact one time. I would assume that that is your recurring contacts, like a listing agent or selling agent. But if it's something else, feel free to let me know your username in the question box, and I'll be happy to take a look into your account after and see why that might be. Patricia, you have asked, will you go over the notes feature? I surely will. So the notes feature is part of your transaction. If we go back and enter into one of our transactions, just past the checklist tab, you'll see an area that says notes. And notes is very similar to just, for example, a sticky note or something that you might add onto a piece of paper or to a folder. You can create notes by just clicking on new and entering information like, for example, call buyer and let them know to obtain cashier's check. And then I would just go to the right-hand side and click on this little save icon, and that locks that note in. So that note is going to be apparent now in this transaction anytime I open it up. I can email a note out. I can also save it as a PDF and print it out. I'll put it on my desk for future reference. So we also have that print option. And if a note is no longer applicable, you can also delete it here. Or you can click on the drop down and you have the option to delete it from there too. And while I'm here, I might as well also go over history. History gives you an audit trail, but very kind of different than the agent dashboard, I should say. This history is only pertinent to the transaction you have open, whereas the dashboard gives an overview of all of your audit trail events. All right, yeah, so again, Notes is just a tool that you can use to add supplementary information to, or supplemental information rather, to your transactions. Let's see what else we've got. Donna, you have asked, on page 8 of our contract is licensee and broker information. Can this be added to a template? Absolutely. I would say that it should, because if you're using that same broker info and licensee information for multiple transactions, that would be a great option to add into a template. The thing that you really just want to steer away from is information that would be transaction specific, like a buyer name. And Sabrina, you have asked, do you have a list of training videos available in this program? Yes, we do. So there was a flyer that was sent out that gives all of those trainings, but I can also send that information just so you're aware in case there's one training you want to attend and then maybe one you're not interested in. I can send that out to you, absolutely. And Melanie, you've asked, could I please get a copy of the prior ones also? Absolutely, I will send those out to you via email at some point today. Valentina, you've asked, how do I request previous trainings be sent to me? Just let me know here in this question box that you would like them, and I will be sure to send them your way. All right, what I'm maybe going to do, because I have a lot of people who are requesting all of the information for the trainings and the previous trainings, is I might have them resend that flyer. So I'll speak with someone at the association and see if they can just send that out. Donna, you have asked, how do I add license number and expiration date? So where you have those fields in your forms, you can enter that information in. If those fields don't appear in your forms and you think they should be there, you may want to reach out to your association and see if that's something that can be added in. Your association works in collaboration with one of our forms designers here in order to design exactly what fields are available on those forms. All right. And I quickly want to put up our product support information. If you have any questions after today's webinar, you're welcome to email me or someone from our team. You can do that at training@ziplogics.com. Additionally, if you have any questions on troubleshooting, if something seems to be technologically wrong inside of your account, you can call our customer care line at 586-840-0140. And they are there 24 hours, 24/7, 365 to assist you. And then if you have any product related questions, like how do I use this, feel free again to email us at training@ziplogics.com. You can also feel free to email me. My email is lclark, that's LCLARK @ziplogics.com. All right. And if you're on social media, please feel free to connect with us. We would love to connect with you and see what you're up to and communicate back and forth. So we are on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and you can also tag us on Instagram. If you're interested in additional trainings, you can visit our live online training calendar. However, we are doing throughout this year one webinar a month that is tailored specifically to South Carolina realtors. And Trina, you have asked, can we watch this webinar at a later date? So I'm actually going to be sending this webinar via email to you within around 24 hours. It should reach you. That will be automatically generated. Just go to the bottom of the email that says, thank you for attending the webinar, and there will be a little link that says watch recording, and you can access today's recording from there. And yes, for everyone who is asking, today's session was recorded, so you will receive that as an attendee within around 24 hours. Deborah, you've asked, where is the TMS number populated from? TMS number, I'm going to guess that that is all of that information on the dashboard that you're referring to, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but all of that information populates from any one entry you make. So provided that you make one entry, say Joe Buyer, it's going to populate everywhere that requests that. The same would be true for a closing date. If I establish a closing date as maybe June 30th, it's going to populate every area that requires that closing date. So it's just the system knowing, okay, this information has been entered in, and this field, and this field also require that same information. So that's just how that functionality works. All right, well, I do thank everyone very much for taking the time. I know that you're all busy, so thanks so much for taking the time to join me today. Jerry, thanks for a very informative session. I love ZipLogix. We are so happy to hear that, and we're so happy that everyone was able to join us for today's session. I hope to see you all next month, and I will be sure to get all of that information out to anyone who requested it. Thanks so much for your time, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.